Hi, my name is Pastor Hal York, and welcome to Truth in the Trenches. Today we're going to be in James chapter 3, verses 7 to 8. For every species of beasts and birds and of reptiles and creatures of the sea is tamed and has been tamed by the human race. But no one can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil and full of deadly poison. We're working our way through what James tells us about the tongue in chapter 3. It's a relevant subject because we all have one. And what he says about the tongue, as much as we find convicting, it is nonetheless true of all of us. We all communicate, and we communicate what we hold, what we value, what we hide, what we think. Our hearts, what we have in our hearts, what we hide in our hearts, what we value in our hearts comes out through the tongue. James stresses this in chapter 1, the end, and Kent Hughes sums up that verse 126, I believe it is, this way. The true test of a man's spirituality is not his ability to speak. We are apt to think that, but rather his ability to bridle the tongue. That's what is the true test of a man's spirituality. And James says the same thing in the last part of chapter 1. The tongue is small but mighty, as we said a few weeks ago. It's like a rudder on a ship. It's a bit in a horse's mouth. It's controlled. Those things are controlled by a very small thing in comparison. Last time we saw the great disruption a small spark can ignite. The tongue is like a fire, and once it gets going, it's hard to control. The devastation it can cause is legendary. It destroys homes, lives, reputations. And James isn't done yet. Our first response upon reading about this small but mighty tongue is, well, since it's so small, I will just control it. I need to tame my tongue. And there must be a course I can take, or a book I can buy, or a self-help coach I can hire to help me tame my tongue. After all, it's just that small little thing in my mouth. How hard can it be? Well, it's a good question because, as we saw last time, once we let loose those words, or even one word, we cannot control the consequences. It only takes a spark to get a fire going. And today there is kindling and underbrush everywhere to take that careless word and turn our lives, our homes, our churches into a raging inferno. How hard can it be is a good question. And even if James said nothing to answer that question, I think if we were honest with ourselves, we know how hard it is because we've all tried and no doubt failed. So James anticipates such a response and has some bad news for those so inclined to think like that. The hardest thing to train on this planet is our tongues. Every species of beast on land or sea man has been able to train. It doesn't mean not every animal, but every species of animal man has been able to train. But that little appendage in our mouth, the tongue, no one can tame the tongue. No one. That includes me, and it includes you. Only one person ever lived who controlled his tongue perfectly for 33 years, and his name was Jesus Christ. And we need to keep that in mind, as we'll see a little bit later on. See, you can train a monkey to ride a bike before you can train or tame your tongue. I'm not suggesting we try to train a monkey to ride a bike. But if you're so inclined, it would be easier doing that than it would be to try to tame your tongue. If your tongue is causing marriage problems and you bring home a bike riding monkey that you taught, your wife may be impressed and your children may think you're amazing, but you really haven't done anything important or life-changing. Training our tongues to be controlled is far more essential than teaching a monkey to ride a bike. Yet, in our culture today, we are far more interested in bike-riding monkeys than a person who has their tongue under control. Buying flowers after we've blown it, for example, with our tongue is easier than controlling our tongues. So we just buy flowers, but that doesn't always put the fire out. It doesn't avoid the shipwreck. So why is it so hard to control our tongues? Well, James doesn't sugarcoat this, so get ready for the answer. It's restless, or resting evil and full of deadly poison. It's restless and it's evil and full of deadly poison. There's nothing subtle about that. It's not hard to understand, but my first response may be like yours. My tongue is restless and evil, full of deadly poison. I'm not sure about that. Now, their tongue is. I suspected that a long time ago, but not my tongue. But James says, no, it's my tongue. That person looking back at me in the mirror, it's his tongue. It's a restless and evil and full of deadly poison. Why? Because that's how God describes my heart and your heart in Romans 3:10-18. Jeremiah describes that the heart is deceitful and desperately wicked. Who can know it? We get introduced to the state or condition of the heart by the tongue. It's the great revealer of what's going on in my heart. Ecclesiastes says, "For the dream comes through much effort, and the voice of a fool through many words." For in many dreams and in many words there is emptiness. Rather, fear God. Proverbs says, when there are many words, transgression is unavoidable, but he who restrains his lips is wise. An untamed tongue is a beast that will rip and tear and destroy relationships to pieces. Look at our society today. The viciousness and the vileness and the vulgarity and the venom that's on the lips of people. And to make matters worse, they see these things as virtues. Paul reminds Timothy of this in 2 Timothy 3, 1-5, familiar verses. But as I read these verses, listen to how many of these things are related to the tongue. He says, "But realize this, that in the last days difficult times will come. Men will be lovers of self, lovers of money, boastful, arrogant, revilers, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, unholy, unloving, irreconcilable, malicious gossips, without self-control, brutal, haters of good, treacherous, reckless, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, holding to a form of godliness, although they have denied its power. Avoid such people as this." It's impossible to train the tongue apart from the power of the Spirit of God living within us. As we've said many times, the heart is the tongue's control center. If we want to control our tongues, we need to guard our hearts. If we're going to guard our hearts, we need to be careful what we are feeding our heart, what we are allowing in our heart, what we are allowing our eyes to watch, our ears to listen to, and our minds to meditate on. And Proverbs 4:23 tells us to guard our heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. But let me read that in the context of what we're talking about. How do you guard your heart? He tells us in these verses, "My child, pay attention to what I say. Listen carefully to my words. Don't lose sight of them. Let them penetrate deep into your heart, for they bring life to those who find them and healing to their whole body. Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of life. Avoid all perverse talk. Stay away from corrupt speech." That's how you guard your heart. Listen carefully to the word of God. Let them penetrate deep into your heart. Pay attention. Don't lose sight of these things. That's the positive side. The negative side is avoid perverse talk. Stay away from corrupt speech. Be careful who you're hanging around, because do not hang around an angry man lest you learn his ways, Proverbs says. Every species of beast and of birds and of reptiles and creatures of the sea is tamed and has been tamed by the human race, but no one can tame the tongue. It's a restless evil and full of deadly poison. Our only hope in controlling the tongue, self-discipline, is to be filled with the Spirit of God and allowing it to control us, and allowing our hearts to be transformed by the Word of God as we meditate upon it day and night. Guard our hearts, for out of the heart the abundance of the mouth speaks. So may this truth guide us and guard us in the trenches of life as we seek to live our lives for the glory of God and the good of others. May God bless.